A Japanese man has just finished a game that took him 3 years to complete, but that is far from what he truly wanted. According to him, the game is far too weak. He wishes he could find one that would last 10 years. Searching for that, he comes across an online game that claims to never end, an endless adventure filled with magic and fantasy. Looking at the available difficulty options, he notices one called Hell Mode, whose description reads, "Regret is the least of your worries, for what you are about to face is the true meaning of despair." Intrigued by the dramatic line, the player chooses that difficulty and then faces the class selection screen. Among the usual classes, such as Swordsman, he is fascinated by Demon Lord, but becomes curious about how difficult the Conjurer seems to be, since it automatically places the player in the social class of Servant and is still in a testing phase. Motivated by a worthy challenge, the moment he clicks to start the game, the Japanese man is pulled into the screen. Sometime later, he wakes up with a younger voice around him, in an environment similar to a womb. In fact, after pushing his way out, he is born again into a place with a medieval atmosphere. After his father picks up the baby, sees that he is a boy, he decides his name will be Alan. Next, we see information explaining that the difficulty Alan chose requires 100 times more XP to level up compared to normal difficulty, but has no level limit. By overcoming despair, we will come to understand the beginning of this world. As time goes by, Alan grows up in a humble home filled with love and attention from his parents. He used to be a 35-year-old Japanese man broke, without a degree, and bad with women named Kanishi Yamada. Now, even though he is a 1-year-old baby and cannot speak, he is able to easily understand the words he hears, mainly because, by luck, Japanese seems to be the main language in this place. Alan was born into a family of servants, just as he selected at the beginning, in a border village where peasants pay taxes to a lord in order to farm the land. His father's name is Rodden. Alan believes Rodden is around 20 years old and sees him as a typical family man who works hard to support his child. His mother's name is Teresha, a very beautiful and kind woman who appears to be in her late teens. That night, after yawning in front of his parents, Alan is put to bed, but instead of sleeping, he raises his hands and mentally commands "status window," imagining it would work like in any isekai. Frustrated that nothing appears, he understands that being spoiled and all is nice, but it is already time for him to start being a conjurer, since he has been trying for a year without success. Then, after some effort, that same night he manages to make a magic book appear in front of him, which makes him scream and immediately alerts his parents. They run to see what happened, but before they can see the book, Alan makes it disappear right as they arrive. Since he pretends to be asleep, his parents believe he was only dreaming or something like that. When the adults leave, the child brings the book back and, upon opening it, finally confirms that he really belongs to the conjurer class. Because of his lack of experience, he is still limited to summoning only a few insects and beasts. Other than that, he notices a message in the book from someone named Elmia, the god of creation. In this message, Elmia says it took some time to finish developing the class properly, and now that it has been chosen by players, none of them will be allowed to switch. Alan interprets this as the reason why his book took so long to arrive. Setting that aside, he notices there are no tutorials explaining how to play the game, meaning he will have to figure out everything on his own. To test his abilities, the first thing Alan tries is creating an insect, and when he does, a card with an insect of rank H appears in front of him. But upon hearing his mother approaching, he pretends to sleep again. Because he is only 1 year old, he ends up falling asleep for real, unable to control his tiredness. The next day, his normal peasant life continues as always. However, whenever he is alone, Alan now has something new to do, because he can finally develop his techniques as a true conjurer. After creating the card, he summons the insect inside it, a somewhat dumb grasshopper that doesn't understand commands and acts like a regular bug. Checking the book to understand how it works, Alan sees that he must give the creature a name, so he starts calling it Denka. As a pleasant surprise, he notices that Denka gives him a status buff of +1 in endurance and agility. He becomes so happy that he shouts, once again drawing his mother's attention, who understands his strange reactions less and less each day. She even sees Denka jumping near her foot and, startled, ends up stepping on him and killing him at least until he is summoned again. As the days pass and Alan keeps practicing, he eventually learns to summon rank H beasts as well. In this case, a little mouse that is also dumb just like Denka, according to Alan. Even so, it gives him a +1 buff to HP and agility, along with a skill called Dash. At least the little creature uses this ability whenever Alan commands it, which is already progressed. Denka, for his part, has the skill Leap. As he develops these abilities, Alan reflects on how this world must be filled with huge, powerful creatures' enemies he certainly won't be able to defeat with the dynamic duo he can summon today. The boy also discovers that he's able to store up to 10 conjuration cards for each creature, and that the most important among them are the buffs. For example, by storing 10 rat cards, his attack increases by 10 points, which certainly explains why Alan showed his parents a strength far greater than what a simple baby should display. In any case, knowing that the experience needed to level up in Hell mode is 100 times higher than normal, the boy has been struggling quite a bit just to advance a few steps. Suddenly, in the middle of the morning, Rodden arrives home covered in blood and holding a spear, but reassures his wife by explaining that he wasn't hurt, it was just the result of hunting a boar a short while ago. Alan shows interest in seeing the boar, so his father puts him on his shoulder to take him for a little walk. Thus, this was the first time Alan was being taken outside the house. Looking around, he was impressed by the beauty and tranquility of that late afternoon. Along the way, Rodden points to a flock of monsters called Albahiron, which always gather and migrate north at this time of year, indicating the arrival of autumn. Speaking of which, Rodden says he named Alan after the Albahiron, because for them, the sky is the limit. These creatures can use their wings to fly anywhere in the world they want true freedom. However, he admits he got scolded when he told Teresia that, since he had chosen their son's name based on a monster. Sometime later, the two reach the boar that had been taken down, a gigantic creature that makes the baby open his mouth in awe. Getting closer, he admits it must be terrifying to face something that size. One of the hunting companions, Gerda, announces Rodden as the one mainly responsible for killing the boar, which earns him a big tribute from the other men. Gerda notices his friend brought his son, so Alan introduces himself with a level of politeness that is literally frightening. Since Gerda has a 1-year-old daughter, Krina, who is nowhere near having that kind of vocabulary, Alan asks if that big beast is strong, and the man says it takes 20 hunters to bring down a C-rank creature like that. 10 months later, Alan was able to conjure rank G creature cards, as well as fuse summons, and the space for cards in his inventory had doubled, which means twice the amount of buffs he could receive. Since fusion required a lot of mana points, he ate and took good care of himself to accumulate the amount needed to use the technique. When everything was ready, he tried mixing 2 rat cards, but despite his excitement, he realized he still didn't have enough MP. Frustrated, he decided to just create another rank G conjuration card, but he couldn't do that either with his current mana limit. Upon turning 3, the boy could create creature cards such as frogs and moles. Mixing the two, he created a card of a rank G bird, granting a +2 buff to agility and intelligence. From that, he named the bird Chappie, which had the skill vocal mimicry, basically Chappie perfectly imitating Alan's voice. Then he conjured the frog, which he began to call Hopper, bearer of the skill Taunt, useful for distracting enemies. The mole, of course, had the skill Dig, very useful for hideouts and traps. As he developed and studied more about his class, Alan discovered that the secret was to know every status deeply so he could create a powerful combination of buffs for each situation. In his opinion, this was a complex and challenging game, exactly what he had been looking for a long time. On the other hand, it's worth noting that Alan is far from summoning creatures strong enough to stand against the possible dragons and boars the world has. In any case, now that it is 3 in the afternoon, the boy hears the voice of a girl challenging him to a knight's duel, one of the activities he doesn't seem to like very much. Even so, Alan presents himself for a duel against Krina, the fierce, at least that's what she called herself. In turn, his rival self proclaimed herself Alan the Honored, and although he pretended to be motivated for the fight, he grumbled internally about having to take this seriously every time. Anyway, serious or not, when the fight begins, Alan takes a series of blows from a wooden sword at an incredible speed. Even though he put all his buffs into agility, the boy admits he can barely block the swords. In the end, Krina breaks Alan's sword in half and secures the victory. At the end of the afternoon, she goes to the boy's house to announce her achievement. Smiling and pregnant with another baby, Teresia asks the girl to head home before it gets dark, and that's what she does. Lying there shattered like it was nothing, Alan suffers the pain of defeat on the ground. Still, at dinner time, the boy volunteers of his own free will to help with the potato harvest, knowing that his mother is heavily pregnant and can't work normally. Internally, Alan knows that at this point he has the vitality of an adult man, even though he's only 3 years old in practice. Teresia and Rodden say that children should never have to work, and that the boy should keep playing with Krina, especially because he already helps inside the house. The child insists, but his parents advise him to enjoy himself as much as he can, because the time will come when he will have to work on the farm, whether he wants to or not. Hearing this, Alan concludes that he and his parents will always be servants until they die, practicing this exhausting labor every day without being able to change their fate. Changing the subject, Teresia and her husband say they saw their son throwing stones at a tree earlier and want to know why. Alan says that his parents themselves warned him about the existence of monsters outside the house, so he has been training to protect his mother with stones. That said, while his father hugged him proudly, the truth was that Alan was only trying to see if he could learn techniques that went beyond conjuration. Teresia asks if her son is also going to protect Krina, but when he remembers how their last duel went, the boy figures she can already handle herself. Rodden comments that he can't wait for the two of them to attend their evaluation ceremony, and when Alan asks what that is, his mother explains that when he turns 5, he will take part in a divine ceremony that determines what talent he possesses. Rodden hopes it will be a talent good enough to pull his son away from a servant's life, and that hope lifts everyone's spirits in the house that night. Some time later, it begins to snow in the village. After continuing his training, Alan is now able to maintain a summoned creature for an entire day without any problems. On the other hand, in his duels against Krina, since she also comes from a conjurer background, the boy struggles a lot to withstand the girl's overwhelming pace. She keeps dominating every match and knocking the kid flat. One day, after Alan loses yet again, Teresia ends up falling to the ground when she gets startled by Denka, which causes her water to break, and now she's about to give birth again. She is quickly taken to a bed in a warm place so everything can go well. But because he's doing everything by himself, Rodden starts worrying that things won't go as smoothly as he hoped. Since Alan is the only one there to help, Krina runs off to call her parents, so Gerda shows up with Matilda, his wife, to help the poor man. Hours pass as Matilda handles the situation and makes sure the delivery happens without complications. It's such a difficult and drawn-out labor that it lasts until the next day, until finally a baby's cry reaches the ears of the men sleeping outside. When the father goes into the room and learns it's another boy, Teresia asks him to choose the name. So Rodden names their second son Mesh. Teresia really likes it, but hopes he didn't take the name from some monster. The poor guy tries to explain himself in every possible way, but Teresia starts laughing. When everyone begins laughing together, Alan can't help thinking about something he has thought ever since he reincarnated into this world. He isn't even a little bit sad about leaving his entire past behind, because the difference between his old life and this one is enormous. It's true, of course, that he'll give everything he has to progress in the game to obtain the best equipment and spells, but when his parents call him over to meet his brother, Alan feels that there is much more to this life than glory and achievements. From that moment on, he decides that his greatest goal is to free his family from servitude. Sometime later, when Alan is 5 years old, he asks his father what the aptitude ceremony is like, and the man explains that it's a special event where everyone from servants to nobles must participate when they turn 5. If Alan shows good aptitude, for example, he might have a chance to rise in life and stop being a servant. The problem is that he'll have several rivals. The boy doesn't understand what that means, so his father explains that when they first arrived in these lands, people started having child after child. In other words, there are a whole bunch of kids the same age as Alan right now. At that moment, Krina appears over the father's shoulder and calls Alan so they can go to the event together. With that, the four gather, and after the walk, Krina is impressed by the number of houses they find in the village where the test will take place. While Alan looks around in admiration, Krina swears she will become a knight if she's designated as a swordsman. When they arrive at a church where the test will be held, Alan notices the commoners wearing clothes much nicer than his, obviously having more money than his family. He even hears some guys picking on him for being a servant. Amid all this, the religious officials open the church door and ask for the blessing of Elmia, the god of creation, so that all children may have equal opportunities. Since this country has seen heroes whose bloodlines once belonged to servitude. For example, Claces, the saint, was a humble commoner by birth, while Diverg, the sword lord, was once merely a servant. Feeling hopeful after hearing this, Alan recalls that before he reincarnated, he saw that classes like Hero and Sword Lord needed to start in lower social classes. Next, the participants are called inside the church to begin the long-awaited evaluation. Alan notices the statue of Elmia, the god of creation. Then the leader of the religious group invites the village chief, Deboji, to begin the evaluations with his son, Palomas. Every child must touch the crystal ball. Then the attributes and talents that are revealed will be written on the metal plate behind the priest. With that, tension takes over the village leader, who starts sweating from so much anticipation. Not very differently, his son approaches the crystal ball. Then his attributes appear on the metal plate, arranged in the same way Alan saw on his own status page. According to what was written, Palomas has the talent to be a merchant, which leaves his father extremely satisfied and emotional, not understanding much and thinking any talent becomes a reason to celebrate. Alan checks his grimoire, which only he can see, and notices that the attributes are displayed as ranks instead of numbers. Meanwhile, another boy takes the evaluation, and upon discovering he has no talent at all, he runs off crying to his father, who lovingly hugs him. Next, a cocky kid slaps his own face before discovering his talent, for good luck. Then he celebrates when he learns he is an Axeman, and Alan is impressed that this boy, Dagora, got one of the attributes with rank of the first one he has seen in his life. As time goes by, all the children take their evaluations until only Alan and Krina are left at the end. Eager to get this thing done, Krina runs toward the crystal ball, and as she extends her hand, the magical item emits an extraordinary glow. Then the metal plate shows that the girl has the talent to become a sword lord, which is practically a miracle. While everyone is stunned by the rarity of such a powerful talent, Krina grumbles that she wanted to be a swordsman, and Alan understands why this girl has always been overpowered in their duels. Now, the son of Rodin is finally called for his evaluation, the last child of the event. Without showing anxiety, Alan only needs to touch the crystal ball and finally show his parents that he is a conjurer. However, he is literally thrown backward because of the brutal magical force radiating from the item, along with a light twice as bright as when Krina was evaluated. Unable to read, Rodin runs to ask the priest what the result was, but incredibly, the boy has no talent at all, where his class should be. The plate shows a glitch filled with random letters. Enraged, Alan begins cursing the families of the devs who can't fix this piece of junk game. But Rodin remains calm and calls his son to go back home. Hours later, the two return to the arms of Teresia and Mash, which warms Alan's heart immediately. And not just then when everyone gathers around the fire. His parents make it clear that he will always be precious to them, regardless of having talent or not. Faced with so much affection, Alan recognizes that his family is so poor they don't even have a bathtub. But that doesn't stop him from being happy. At bedtime, the boy reviews his grimoire and checks that he truly has all rank E attributes, which leads Alan to discover something. He is the only one in this world playing on Hell mode. Everyone who took the evaluation was 5 years old, which means they should all be level 1 just like Alan. However, it seems that the rank system probably reflects how much development they can expect each time they level up. So the reason Alan has all rank E attributes is because his growth speed in Hell mode is almost 100 times slower than normal, and this seems to mean that his ranks are showing the same fraction of the real value. After spending a lifetime playing easy games, Kenichi Yamada was reborn into this world where he is the only player on Hell mode, which could drive anyone insane in his place, but Alan refuses to give up. After all, he threw himself into this challenge precisely to put ridiculously easy games in their place. Speaking of which, it was pretty clear that the nonsense written in place of his class was just a clumsy glitch. So the devs should fix it soon, and Alan is ready to complain to those guys until everything is perfect, just to prove that no one should mess with a gamer with no social life. The next morning, Alan asks his mother why his father is like that, since the man has been acting strange since last night. Near nightfall, the whole family goes to Krina's house to celebrate the girl being discovered as a sword lord. Excited, she tells Alan that a sword lord is stronger than a swordsman, and the kid pretends to play dumb to hide that he didn't know. Matilda also says the village chief stopped by to gift the family a liquor, and trying to hide his happiness, Rodin keeps a straight face and tells everyone to enjoy the drink. Alan starts to suspect that his father is jealous of Krina for becoming a sword lord, but he doesn't think his father is that kind of person. Gerda asks Rodin to take the first sip of the liquor, because according to him, visitors should drink first. Faced with Gerda's insistence, an argument begins between the two until Gerda reveals that Rodin wants to cut ties between the two families. Cornered, Rodden explains that this wasn't what he wanted, and that Krina's talent is so extraordinary that she might even become a knight and serve the country, having a good chance of reaching nobility one day. Because of that, in his opinion, important people like her shouldn't waste time socializing with servants. With that said, the argument between Rodden and Gerda starts getting close to turning into a fight. So Alan asks Krina to do something about the two of them, but their wives get there first, showing that physical aggression can also solve problems. After the punch Matilda lands on her husband's face, Alan learns that you shouldn't mess with that woman. The boy asks her if those two have always been this hard-headed, and she says that becoming parents made them mature to a certain extent, because back then they used to trade punches almost every day. Teresia says the two couples have been friends since childhood, and that's why they grew up together. While Matilda tells the story of when they found out about the founding of a new village 10 years ago, and the four of them decided to build their own houses on that land. So their houses look quite similar. Rodden and Gerda start competing again to see who worked more on the construction. But they make peace after drinking the liquor they both haven't touched since they got married. At dawn, while working, Gerda learns that the Knight Order is after Krina. For that reason, alongside his friends, he takes his daughter to the city where yesterday's evaluation took place. Surprisingly, the news about a sword lord existing among the commoners spread quickly, making many people already aware that Krina was the talented child. Suddenly, Dogora appears holding a club and looking angry, and Alan remembers he was that axe-wielding brat from the evaluation. Dogora asks what Alan is doing there, since this city isn't a place for talentless losers. Immediately, Krina steps between them to protect her friend, and Gerda has to hold his daughter back before she beats the kid up. At that moment, the Knight Order arrives, imposing respect on the population as they watch in admiration the arrival of Captain Zenoff, a sword master, and his subordinates. When they get off their horses, the village chief calls Gerda and his daughter, and Alan notices how excited his friend is about all of this. It's only been 3 years since the two of them started pretending to duel, and now she is standing before a golden opportunity. However, Gerda doesn't seem pleased with the captain's proposal for Krina to join the Knight Order, arguing that she is still too little and doesn't have the strength to hold a real sword. Zenoff not only says the girl is a sword lord, but that he will take it as a lie if the father refuses the proposal, a direct attempt to deceive Baron Granville. According to the officer, falsifying the evaluation is punishable by death, and seeing the father hesitate, it will be necessary to verify whether the child's talent is legitimate or not. Given the situation, the village chief proposes a duel. Gerda begs for mercy, but Zenoff makes it clear that if Krina doesn't fight, she will be executed along with her family. Despair overtakes everyone watching that cruel scene except Krina, who, upon seeing a sword being offered to her, runs to it and shows unbelievable confidence. Thus, the child is placed before the vice captain, who introduces himself as Leibrand and belongs to the Lancer class. After announcing herself as Krina, the knight, she charges at the officer without any fear, quite the opposite. She acts as if she were playing or something like that, and there is a smile on her face that doesn't go away. The two begin exchanging blows, but Leibrand blocks the girl's attack easily. While Dogora is impressed by the girl's strength, Alan evaluates that perhaps her swordsmanship skill is already at level 5 from all the practice they do every day. Even so, the vice captain counterattacks and forces Krina to block with difficulty, making Gerda more and more desperate. The girl doesn't lose confidence and tries to retaliate, but opens her guard too much and takes a strong kick to the stomach, being thrown into the wall hard enough to crush the bricks. Gerda tries to run after his daughter, but he is held back by 2 soldiers, as well as Alan and Rodden, who are prevented from helping their friend. Defeat seemed certain, as did the execution of Krina and her family, but the Sword Lord rises again and begins to emit a magical energy that makes the rival's left eye tremble. With that, the girl charges at her opponent again and shows strength and agility 4 times greater than before, forcing Leibrand to give his all to avoid being cut apart. After a brutal series of blows, Krina manages to slice the vice captain's blade in half and almost takes his skull with it. Then, Zenoff declares the end of the duel and Krina's victory. As everyone watching the fight starts celebrating, the captain approaches Gerda and congratulates him for having raised a legitimate sword lord, then asks forgiveness for doubting the man's word. Gerda, however, keeps a stern face and focuses only on protecting his daughter, while Zenoff asks for a chance to discuss the future of such a talented young girl and if it makes him feel more comfortable. Jurda can bring his friends to the meeting. Hours later, at the village chief's residence, Jurda keeps a stern face the entire time after seeing her daughter's life put at risk. Alan understands why the chief's son is sitting at this table, but he has no idea why that axe warrior kid is here with his father. Maybe they're desperate not to be overshadowed by the Sword Lord. At that moment, Xenoph explains that he was sent by Baron Granville to determine whether it's true that a Sword Lord has appeared among them, and the result couldn't be clearer after the duel. Then Xenoph informs Deboji that, by order of their master, this village shall be called Krina Village from today onward. According to the captain, 3 years ago a Sword Lord was born into a count's family. But Alan doesn't understand how, since, from what he remembers of the game's rules, someone of that class can only be born as a servant, commoner, or baron. Anyway, the officer adds that this person even served the royal family but failed to meet expectations, which led to a reevaluation that determined this person was actually just an ordinary swordsman. It was later discovered that many members of the nobility greatly exaggerated this individual's talents, which ultimately led to the creation of this rule of always reevaluating children who are considered special. With that said, Xenoph apologizes once again to Jurda for subjecting his daughter to such a difficult judgment, and asks him to raise the girl with dedication, because at the age of 12 she will be able to study at the academy and, eventually, serve the royal family. Dogora asks if anyone can enter this academy to become a knight, and the boy's father apologizes for his son's interruption. Showing patience, the captain replies that an instructor will be sent to this village, so Dogora should dedicate himself to studying and training to earn his approval for the academy. Krina says that Alan can study with them, but Dogora says that brainless people like him, without talent, aren't capable of doing that. Krina quickly rushes to defend her friend again, and Alan finds it funny to be 40 years old and being defended by a 5-year-old girl. By the way, Xenoph finally notices Alan, and upon realizing who his father is, he stands up from his chair to greet Rodden, the boar hunter, a true local legend. Rodden doesn't understand where all this admiration is coming from, and the captain explains that his baron is passionate about the boar meat served by their village. In that moment, Alan thinks about how his father and the other workers risked their lives to hunt that beast. But the baron was the one who kept the meat. Still, he is happy about the respect the captain is showing Rodden. After the meeting ends and the two families separate, Rodden comments to his son about how Krina might become a heroine like the ones from the stories, but that even servants like him can sometimes be acknowledged by nobles. In any case, the man believes his son still has a chance to achieve great deeds in life, since he carries his father's genes. With that said, Alan takes out 2 fruits he stole from the meeting to give to his mother and brother, and the two burst into laughter when Rodden shows that he stole even more. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.